answer, you know?
Yeah.
And then after, if we can put them in the chat once like Brendon has the whiteboard up, because I'll be able to see it. So
I got access to the chat too.
Okay, cool.
So real quick, also the Google Doc that I just sent is everything that we have here on the whiteboard. We have our movement prep, power, strength, conditioning, and all of our categories and buckets that we're going to be filling in with our case studies. So you can follow along. My wife, Jenny, is going to be filling out that spreadsheet with everything that's up here. You can follow along, or you could print that out right now if you wanted, or download it for yourself in an Excel sheet so that you can fill it out as we go along, however you want to do that. So that's why that link is there if you want access to what's going on the whiteboard here. Go for it.
All right. So this is a real simple keynote. I pretty much just put in 3 real clients that I see on a weekly basis. They're all very unique from one another in that they have different backgrounds or different ages, different goals. But it would give us kind of a well-rounded approach to looking at programming with a few different situations. And what I'll do is I'll kind of go through their actual assessment notes. I tried to just parse down from their actual intake that I have down to kind of the key things that are going to dictate how we adjust their program one way or the other. And then we'll go into the programming piece with Brendon and we'll actually build those out. It's important to realize, like, again, these are people I see in a group setting and in a rehab setting. So I think they were very good examples in that, like, we can use the CFSC system to work with these people, even though you'll see when we get to them, they all have some sort of injury or limitation or difference in goals, but we're able to use that CFSC program. So I tried to choose people that I thought were very good examples specifically, but these are people who are on my weekly schedule at MBSC. So we'll go right into the first case study. The pictures are just pictures that I found on the internet. These aren't the actual people, but I tried to find someone who kind of represented the person that I was talking about, but these are just like stock photos on the internet. So case study number 1 is a 50-year-old female. She's a teacher, English teacher in K through 12. And, she's moderately active. She just started at the gym about a year ago. In conversation with her, one of the main things she was focused on, what brought her to the gym and what her outcome a year from now ideally would be, losing some weight. She's someone who's kind of battled with weight loss, and much like a lot of women in that population, just in her mind has 10 pounds that she wants to lose. Not someone who's excessively overweight, but that was her number 1 goal she voiced to me coming in. The reason she was seeing me in Movement is Medicine, in addition to starting to come into groups, was to reduce hip, ankle, and back pain. She had pretty chronic issues all on her right side specifically, and we'll get into those a little bit more specifically in a second. Also, she's someone who runs pretty regularly, 2 or 3 times a week, not that far, maybe like 3 miles, but enjoys the activity more so than actually she enjoys coming and lifting. She's lifting because she knows it's good for her, and she thought it would make her feel better. But mainly she wants to improve running performance, wants to just be in slightly better shape and be able to do those things without pain. Kind of going through her subjective input when I ask her, like, what are her symptoms? Right ankle pain, achy at the end of the day, especially it starts to ache and get sore. Sometimes the foot and ankle get swollen. Right anterior hip pain, worse post run. So after her running, it can be worse sometimes. Needs to make sure she rolls and stretches to kind of get ahead of that. It might ache or so a day or so later. And right lower back pain, also sometimes achy at the end of the day. Someone who's teaching up and down, spending a lot of time on her feet. So by the end of the day, sometimes these things hurt. Subjectively, these are the things when I asked her, tell me about your symptoms, that how she kind of described them. All relatively achy. Sometimes a little bit of sharp pain in the front of the hip. And we'll kind of get into why that is here in the objective when I take in her actual objective medical history. Right ankle reconstructive surgery 10 years ago. She broke her ankle, had to get that reconstructed. And so that ankle, ever since then has been really pretty achy and stiff. Went through a formal physical therapy rehab, but it's still dealing with some mobility limitations and some achiness pretty much day to day. About 1 year ago, she had a right hip labral repair. So we kind of see a pattern already taking place here as far as, right side issues going on. Had that labral repair, went through a formal rehab, again, still dealing with some stiffness and soreness. She's able to run, but obviously there are some problems there. And then even further back, double mastectomy, breast cancer 12 years prior. So a fairly complicated medical history. You see a number of things on the right side, all things to take note on regarding her mobility and her ability to, do certain movements within the weight room. And what we'll do next is get into her actual movement assessment and her strength assessment, what I looked at when she came in to see me in the clinic, and I kind of pulled her out of the groups to kind of look at a couple of things. So, Brendon, anybody have any questions so far?
Not so far. I haven't seen any hands raised or anything in the chat.
All right, so kind of getting in a little bit deeper, like that was just her, some notable things from the front side of her questionnaire. Again, run activities. I always want to see, like, what does your activity look like? One of my main questions is, like, right now, what does a normal week of exercise look like for you? So run or walk, depending on how she feels. Some days she runs, some days she walks, but she has about a 3-mile route she does 2 or 3 days a week. She goes to the gym 2 or 3 days a week. That was, again, recent. Like, I started seeing her shortly after she came to the gym and joined to the groups. 2 to 3 days, depending on what her schedule allows. So she's fairly active, but we're trying to get her into a strength training program that fits her. We don't want to put a square peg in a round hole. And she has, obviously, some significant issues that are not back to normal yet. Teach her schedule, on her feet most of the day. She's been on a weekly nutrition guidance program where she checks in with a nutritionist, logs her food, and that's something she's been doing for a pretty long time to help maintain the weight that she wants. And again, she wants to continue improving that and came to us for more guidance in that. As far as her orthopedics, I put her through an SFMA because she came in presenting, some chronic pain. Again, not completely limiting, but it does bug her and limits the amount of running that she likes to do. And she had mentioned there were some things in the weight room that she could not do. So the major things that stood out when I looked at her SFMA, and if you guys aren't familiar, it's just the version of the FMS you want to use for people who are currently in pain. So just kind of like a more comprehensive version of the FMS for a medical scenario. So in looking at her toe touch, meaning she's standing up on her feet, feet together, bending down, reaching to touch her toes, knees straight. Painful, limited right hip flexion. She couldn't touch her toes initially. So what I did is I broke it out. I looked at her hip flexion, laying in supine on the table. At end range on that right side where she had the labral repair, she had some pretty typical pinching, FAI type symptoms in the anterior hip, limited when looking at her internal rotation in that hip specifically, and stability motor control limitation in her pelvis, meaning like she has trouble controlling her pelvis in space. If I look at like a cat camel and some pelvic tilting, generally when I first took her on intake, some issues with that. So something to take note of there. We need some pelvic motor control and just limited right hip flexion. So we had to restore that quality. Mostly limitations from her having that arthroscopic labral repair. So something we need to think about there. Extension, going down, I looked at her extension screen as well. So feet together, knees straight, bending backwards as far as she can, trying to reach the wall behind her. Limitation in the anterior front hip and pelvic extension, painful in that position. Again, limitations from that labral repair on the right. And then stood out pretty obviously in her squat screen. She had limited right dorsiflexion. When I broke that out and looked at it on the table, ankle was still fairly limited, lots of scar tissue. That surgery was done about 10 years ago, I believe, 12 years ago, I think. So I wrote, and that ankle was pretty stiff. So limited dorsiflexion. In watching her walk, I had her just kind of do some basic gait analysis. You can see that she walks actively around that right ankle. Because of the limited dorsiflexion, you can see her foot tracks out. If you ever seen me walk, that's what my left side looks like. It's true. It's literally the same pattern as me. And what that opened my eyes up to also is because with myself, I know I sometimes get anterior right hip issues. So she tends to walk and run around that dorsiflexion, that ankle. So it's not a surprise to me that she ended up with a labral issue, probably on that right side and that hip, because 10, 12 years earlier, she's been working with running consistently 3 days a week with an ankle that doesn't really move well. So that stress, I think, I can't say with any certainty that that's why, but and watching her move, I would not be surprised if we got to that labral issue because of the ankle limitation beforehand. So things to take note of: definitely need to improve that right dorsiflexion. Also some limitation in her right toe extension, which I think that might have got cut off on the PowerPoint, but I just know from my experience, her right toe is also limited in extension, probably because she has not toed off and dorsiflexed through that ankle in some time. And then obviously some hip mobility and pelvic control stuff we need to work on regarding that labor. Prior to seeing us, no real strength training background. Had really just done running, used an elliptical, ran on the treadmill, ran outside. I take her through what I call like a basic entry-level workout to kind of see what they do. So we'll go through like all the basic patterns: squat, hinge, split squat, single leg stance, single leg deadlift, just to try to get a feel of how does she look moving around, how comfortable are they in the gym. It also gives them kind of lets them get comfortable with our program. Pretty obvious from the get-go, like just looking at her, seeing her do single leg stance type things, that her single leg hip stability needed work. Now, obviously, we're working with probably some poor proprioceptive input just due to the limitations in that hip and side of the pelvis anyhow. So I think as that stuff gets better and we start to be able to feed her into some more of those single leg activities as that hip gets better, then we'll be able to do that. Specifically painful, no splits position stuff. Split squat was no good on either side for her.
Both sides?
So it says left hip, and this should be right hip and toe. It was painful on the right on both sides.
Okay.
So specifically when the right leg was back, she could feel it a lot in the front, like kind of pinching. Kind of like pulling on the front. When that right leg was forward, she was getting that FAI type symptom at the bottom, right? Whereas in goblet squat, she actually felt okay. Like I had her do a squat press out, not a problem. So that told me right then and there, okay, we can't do any split position stuff yet. But we can maybe start with a goblet squat, and we can maybe start with some bilateral hinging, and some easy reaching work, like single leg reaching. She was on a deadlift, she was fine, wobbly, but it didn't hurt, right? So the only real red light we had was she couldn't touch her toes yet. So we had to restore that at the beginning. I didn't want her deadlifting until we restored that. And I didn't want her in any split position work. I also didn't want her doing any impact activities until we kind of get that stuff cleared out. So we could just basically do some basic core stuff, some med ball stuff, plenty to get her started. Upper body pressing was a little weak, but not painful. And basic core strength kind of needed work. So if we kind of think about what our red lights are, anything where we have to toe off on that right side, anything in split position, any impact. But from there, we can probably start with some real entry-level stuff on there. So, Brendon, would it be better if we go and we program this person and then we go to case study?
Yeah. That's perfect.
Okay,
Let's program her first. So if you stop your screen share.
Yep, I'll do that.
That way, am I full screen now? Can anyone confirm that?
I can.
You can? Oh, never mind. My wife can. Cool. Okay. So actually, real quick, there was a question about is the SFMA available for trainers?
Yeah, you can take it. You might not be certified in it at the end. You could take it online, level 1. You could take it in person, level 1. As a trainer, it's just an assessment strategy. It's not a treatment strategy. So you are perfectly fine to take it. It's just a more stretched out version of the FMS to break down movement more. So I recommend our trainers to take it. I've been trying to get, especially some of the older ones. Yeah. And it just helps you look at those patterns in the FMS better too. So in my opinion, I think it's valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the FMS as macro movement, like gross movement of all the joints, and the SFMA is just a breakdown of micro movement, or all the joints or all the little movements that go into a pattern. So it just allows you to make a better decision. Like you said, you're not certified in it, but anyone can take it. I don't think we got any other questions. Case number 1, even though she enjoys running as a regular activity, do you recommend her to stop running throughout the first phase of her training while progressing her through the correctives? Great question.
Yeah, very good. So what I did, and this was a hard battle with her for 2 reasons. One, she's a runner. So like she didn't want to stop running, as most runners are. Like they're always pretty stubborn with that. Naturally, also her personality, she's very outspoken. I'll just tell you from a personal standpoint. So I was like, I knew right away I couldn't say stop running. Yeah. What I said to her was, can you just choose to walk for a few weeks, right? Because I had to kind of figure the battle I would win. So if I could
you're meeting her where she's at.
Yeah. So I said, can you just do me a favor and just choose to walk instead of run for the next few weeks until we kind of get you to a point where you can deal with the stress of running? And she was fine with that, because I knew if I had said, hey, you're going to just stop running, she would have told me to go screw myself probably. So that's where we settled. I said, just walk for the next few weeks. I think you're going to feel a lot better. And then from there, we'll be able to pick that intensity back up.
Cool. All right. Anyone else have any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. Nothing in the question box. Yeah, I'll repost the link in a minute. Oh, real quick with you. So I get this question a lot. What is the beginning workout that you take everyone through? Do you want to actually program that first? So say it's your first day. What is an example program that you take? Like you said, so you have your true physical or your true assessment, which is your FMS or your SFMA.
Yep.
Now, our second assessment is actually taking you through the workout where we get you comfortable and going into the gym. And they're generally exercises that every single person can do. So if you use the same workout with everybody day 1, then it's technically a screen because you can judge it based off of all the other people that you've trained. So real quick, I'm just going to go to the whiteboard. You got the SFMA. So Kev, we can work together here. Am I full screen, everybody? I'm full screen. All right, cool. So first thing I'm going to take them through. So I got these pretty cool magnets that go on the whiteboard here. So it just says squat, but what version of the squat are we going to do? I like to use the number, the 80-20 number, or Pareto's principle. So what are 80% of your people going to be able to start with the first day into the gym is a goblet squat. So we have squat here, right? So we have goblet squat. So again, this is the first workout you take every single person through. Now we're going to do, because we generally only have an hour or maybe even less on their first day because people are getting accommodated with the gym and how it works. And there's a lot more explaining to do in the first workout. So actually we got probably 30 minutes of true exercise. So we're just going to do 2 sets of 8. And then based off of what that person looks like or presents or what you took from their intake, you're going to pick a weight that you think they can handle for their first set so that they have success for 8 reps. And then where you go from here, if you have someone that you don't think can handle reps, you use your regressions, which would be your bodyweight squats, your assisted squats. So already from this first workout, also an assessment workout that we take the same person through, we're going to get a lot of information from that. Next one, I would I do go to push-up. So we're going to do something for our legs, something for our upper body, and then push-ups. Again, it's going to be 2 sets of 8. Can they do regular push-ups on the ground? Do they need to do push-ups with their hands elevated? And again, we're taking notes. So now if they go into an adult group, I can share with the coach hey, when she's in your group tomorrow for the first day, she needs to be doing push-ups or on a bench or on a rack. Or hey, he's really good at push-ups. He did 2 sets of 8, nailed it. Make them harder for him or her. Okay. My next drill is just going to be a front plank, and I'm going to share with everyone later the checklist product that I just put out. It's in there I have all our standards for each exercise, and our standard is 60 seconds. So can you hold a front plank for 60 seconds? Yes or no? If it's good, make it harder, body saw, wheel roll out. If it's not 60 seconds, then we need to regress it, which would just probably be less time. But again, it's another assessment tool. So 2 sets of 60 seconds. Are you putting this in the sheet? No. This is an assessment workout. So this would be my first tricep. Jenny's going to put this in the sheet for everyone so you could have your assessment first training session. Anything to add to this tricep, Kevin, before I make the second tricep?
No, that's good. Generally, like Brendon was saying, I like to try to see a measure of general lower body strength, which you get with Goblet Squat, general upper body strength, and anti-extension core strength. So those are good entry level, right? And I guess the one little thing I would say about that is I think your context matters. So like, I would say in my context, the first time I see someone on one-on-one, it's usually in a pain situation, because most of my one-on-one clients are someone who come out of movement as medicine and go into the gym in a rehab context. So typically I might see them on a slightly more regressed version of that, right? Because of my context is different, but it's essentially the same program. So essentially, like, my Goblet Squat is usually a squat press out, because it's probably someone coming from rehab. My push-up is a push-up, and then front plank is probably front plank. It just depends on what they're doing. So it could be a modified front plank, like an incline or from their knees, or in a bear position, but looking at those same 3 qualities, maybe just on a more regressed version.
So we got a question, is there a particular order? No particular order. What we want to do is something for your upper body, something for your lower body, something for your core. And then the next round, I have a quad set. So we have single leg deadlift for 2 sets of 8. So now we get to see how they move on one leg. Split squat, we get to see how they move on one leg, 2 sets of 8. Again, use your regressions or progressions. Dumbbell row, 2 sets of 8 on your first workout. And then anti-rotation holds in tall kneeling. Everyone starts there for 2 sets of 10-second holds on each side. Now, this could also be or TRX row. The cool thing about these exercises, again, is 80% of your people are going to be totally cool to start here and not have a problem with that. So that means that when somebody comes in for their first day, you know exactly what you're doing with them, and then you can judge their movements and how they're doing based off of what you've seen other people do on their first day. So now you know the next time they come into the gym, I'll have a much better idea of where we should begin and where we should go. Or if they're joining into a group, you have a much better starting place, and you can have that conversation with whoever their head coach is and say, hey, Kevin, when he came to his first exam or his first assessment training session, he goblet squatted 15 and had to do a press out. He did 2 sets of 8 push-ups. His front plank, he only front planked for 20 seconds. His single leg deadlift wasn't very good. His balance is off. His knees are bent. He's kind of opening his hips, so he's going to need a regression there. Split squats, he was okay. We did TRX row, he was okay. And tall kneeling anti-rotation holds, he was okay. So that you get so much information. So don't feel like you have to have you don't have to have a crazy elaborate assessment process. You don't have to do the FMS or the SFMA. We like it because we tease a lot of this stuff out beforehand. But just have a program that you use with everybody all the time, and you'll get really, really good at screening for your program that you're going to take them through.
I'm going to answer a question here that Jordan Baum had it's going to be easier if I say it verbally than if I type it. So she asked, what is my typical assessment when you first see someone, not a workout, but an actual evaluation? So I'll run through it. So, I mean, they all fill out an intake that's pretty thorough about their lifestyle, their pain, their exercise levels, all of those things. And I'll go through that first, then I'll actually have that same conversation with them. A lot can be kind of gained just from talking, mainly because if I get them talking, they'll usually tell me a lot more than they'll write on the paper. Kind of glean a lot of things from that. Then when it's time to actually start looking at things, I use an SFMA to kind of get a big picture view. And then I always say you zoom in your focus from there. Without a doubt, you need to do more than just SFMA. You got to like break down those joints. But if you do the SFMA properly, it teaches you how to do that. I think people sometimes give FMS or SFMA a bad name because they think you just look at the gross movement patterns. But if you follow the instructions the way it's meant to be done, it zooms in. So I'll go through the SFMA and I'll start to zoom in on the breakouts, they're called. So see where the limitations are, look at their isolated hip, isolated shoulder, mobility, motor control, whatever it might be. And then from there, you know, I probably do some sort of treatment if there's a mobility limitation. If it's indicated via SFMA takes you to certain outcomes, whether it's soft tissue outcome, joint mobility outcome, motor control outcome. If there's a soft tissue indication or a pain management indication, then I'll probably do some manual work if it's going to help them be able to do their motor control drills better, do their mobility drills better. I'll get them moving better. And then if there's still time in that session, if it's the initial session or the second session maybe, then I'll go through kind of that entry level workout because I want them to start to kind of have the mindset of exercise as soon as possible. So they don't get attached to the idea that everything's going to be me working on them on the table. I want it to be as much of an active process as possible. So the sooner I can get them into some sort of modified entry level workout, like Brendon talked about, they can start to move along that line. And yeah, Brian said it's unique is that I am an LMT. Now, if you're a trainer, okay, your intake will still be this. You could probably still do an SFMA, but you're just not going to, when your outcomes in your SFMA come to management of pain or manual techniques, then you refer out, but you could probably still have a lot of tools at your disposal as a trainer to do trainer things, right? And when you get an outcome that needs a therapist or someone with manual techniques, you have them do that, but you can still get people better in any of those patterns that might be limited from a motor control or a soft tissue extensibility standpoint with the tools that you have as a trainer. So I think you can follow a very similar outcome, just the way you treat people. You just don't have the manual techniques at your disposal, which are a small part of what I do as a coach. I would say it's the smallest part of what I do as a coach and a therapist is the manual work. The majority of what I do is exercise-based work, just kind of applied at the right time.
Also, the workout that we just did, at the very least, if you use a consistent workout program, I mean, ideally, yeah, you'd have the FMS screen and the SFMA and whatnot. But you can also, right, you can outsource those things to somebody who does those things for a living as well.
Mm-hmm.
Bunch of questions about the CFSC regression progression sheet. We're taking down all the emails right now, so if someone should want that, I can get that to you later. I'm actually currently updating it for the CFSC website right now, so there will be an updated version. I still have to talk to you, Kev, and Mike to finalize that. So Jenny is taking down everyone's emails if you're throwing them in there right now. Okay, let's program for this. What was her name? Does she have a name, or is it just case study 1?
It's case study 1.
Case study 1. Okay, let's give her a name. Carol. Let's go. Okay.
Okay, it's Carol.
Carol. All right. Now, the big thing was that there's no split squats, right? That was the number one red flag.
Yeah, that was one that was definitely a red light for her. It did not feel good.
Okay, so if everyone has that sheet available to them, what you're looking at here is that sheet. So over here we have foam roll, soft tissue, stretch mobility, motor control and corrective, and dynamic warm-up, which fall under movement prep. Oh, you can't see me. There we go. Fall under movement prep. That's going to be about the first 25 to 40 minutes of our program, depending on if it's more of an adult, they need more movement prep. If it's more of an athlete, athletes need probably less movement prep and more time spent on speed and strength work. So again, 20 to 35 minutes is going to be your warm-up stuff. Down here, I made 3 different blocks. So the first block is an upper body explosive, a lower body explosive, and a core or corrective exercise. Our second block is a quad set, hip dominant, knee dominant, and it's going to be bilateral. Down here in 3A is going to be unilateral. So we're trying to get in a bilateral pattern and a unilateral pattern every day. Push-pull, we have horizontal push-pull, we have vertical push-pull. We try to get one of those in each day. We have anti-extension and then anti-rotation and lateral flexion. And then down here, I have in D, and I have an open exercise. What I mean by that is it's kind of like a wild card. So it could be core, corrective, push-pull, hip, knee, explosive. Now, that is a lot of stuff. You don't have to write something in for all of them. All you're doing here is you're creating a template that helps you decide where I insert these strength exercises so that we get in all of our movement patterns each week. Now, Carol here, we're going to write up 90% of your people are going to train with you twice a week. Some people will train 3 days a week. Rarely will you ever have anyone who has enough money or time to pay you and come to the gym for 4 or 5 days a week. If you do have that type of person, you're probably going to be writing the program for home because they won't be coming into the gym to do it. Most people are going to be 2 days a week. So we want to make sure we get in all of our movement patterns 2 or 3 days a week. So the other thing you can see down here is we have conditioning. Now I put conditioning into 3 different buckets. It's the no impact bucket, which is going to be your bike, your row, your walk. There is the low impact bucket, which is your jogging and maybe some Metcon work, some sled pushing. And then our high impact, which is almost always sprinting or jumping. So you have 3 different types of impact conditioning. Athletes are going to need more of the high impact stuff, and the adults are going to probably be more in the no impact or low impact. So that's how we categorize everything. Those are the buckets we're working with. So Kevin, with Carol here, based off of her stuff. So other than like just a normal traditional like foam roll, all your stuff, what extra soft tissue stuff do you have her doing? Like,
yep, I spend extra time on her anterior hip with the rolga, like the ball part of the rolga, and I have her spend extra time on the lower leg, so posterior, lower calf, Achilles, lateral ankle area as well, because those 2 areas are specifically have a lot of scar tissue, but there's a lot of resting tone in that tissue because of the tension there. So just a lot of resting neurological tension there.
All right, cool. So for soft tissue and foam roll, I have just a regular traditional foam roll with some extra anterior hip and posterior calf work. That will be about, 3 to 5 minutes? And hopefully she comes in early and does it?
Yeah. Someone just asked if this is going to be recorded.
It's recorded.
Are you recording it?
Yeah, and we'll post it up later. So if you got to go, it's cool.
All right, I'm just checking.
Okay.
Good.
Stretch and mobility. Any specific stretch or mobility stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we do all like the kind of stuff we teach in the cert. We do 90-90. We do posterior hip rock. It's especially important for her. With that anterior hip pain, opening up the posterior capsule is pretty valuable for her. We do extra ankle mobility work every day. In that we do the wall ankle, we do ankle mobility on the box, and we do articular rotations, flexion, extension, rotation of the ankle daily.
So you said wall. What was it? Wall
box.
Wall box.
And then the circles and flexion extension.
Got it.
And those sometimes are worked into the lift. Like we're always doing something in the warm up, but like where Brendon said, like extra for filler, like sometimes I have her active rest be like her ankle cars or her wall ankle and stuff like that. So that way I don't have to always jam it in, because a lot of times she's in a group. Like she sees me once a week for like treatment / training, but then she comes in a group. So I need her to be able to do this in a group setting, and I can't have her be like going off rogue when a group is coming. So I kind of just say, hey, squeeze in one of these in the warm up, and then I want you to kind of replace something or add it as active rest during the lift. And that's kind of how we can start to provide specific interventions in a general setting like this.
Well, the 2 things I like that you said there was, 1, we know what she's going to do for her open exercise now. So I'm going to put that down here in open.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Extra ankle.
And I really have focused on the ankle because, like I said, in watching her walk, I could tell that I think a lot of that hip stress came from the fact that she externally rotates that hip to get around the fact that she can't toe off and can't dorsiflex, which is why I think she put so much stress on that labrum. So to me, like I looked at the hip and it was a pretty typical FAI turned labral tear. Where I said, like, listen, if I could get her ankle better, I bet this hip feels better. So I really tried to look at, okay, this ankle is extra stiff. Let's spend time on trying to get this ankle open.
And I also like that you said, what was the second thing I was going to say? I'm not remembering now. Sorry, it'll come up to me.
Yeah.
Rob asked, do we have 2, 3, 4 day templates? The template I gave you is for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. We follow this same template every single day. It's just what the exercises we select are different. Again, I'm not going to fill in every single one of these. We only have an hour, but we're trying to get in most of these things. If you do have someone that comes 4 or 5 days a week, I don't try to do as much of this, and I try to spread these out more over that 4 or 5 days so I can focus more on certain patterns. What we're trying to do, though, if you only come twice a week, which is most of your people, is get all of our movement patterns in so that we're not missing anything. Okay, so motor control and corrective, anything specific here?
What's really good is, like, the stuff that she needs is stuff that we do in the group anyways. So supine breathing to get her pelvis, kind of some better motor control of her pelvis, cat camel, leg lower are all things that are in the group. But those are things that she specifically needs attention with. So really, like in our sessions, I kind of coach her up really hard on these so that when she gets into the group, she can hit the ground running.
Got it. Okay. Dynamic warm-up?
I just, I had her pull back, at least on the impact. So she kind of did all the dynamic stretching. But when they started to do lots of skipping and high knee run and stuff like that, at least initially, I said, why don't you just kind of go off the side and do a little bit more dynamic stretching? And what's ironic is, like, then this kind of became her rehab after, like, because she needed to get better at this stuff. But initially we pulled it out. I'm going to answer Sean's question. Sean Crane asked real quick. He noticed ankle inversion, eversion is rarely included in CFSC. Can you explain and discuss? We don't put it in the group in a rehab setting. If someone is limited, especially in eversion, I see a much more limitations in eversion. I almost never see them in inversion. I'll have people work at it, but it just goes back to the 80-20 situation where, like, I would say it's about 90-10. About 97% of people come in with dorsiflexion limitations, then maybe 8% come in with an eversion limitation, and then maybe that 2% come in with an inversion limitation from what I see. Now, if there's someone who has frequent sprains or scar tissue or issues with that lateral portion of the ankle, maybe you need to work on inversion and do some contract relax. But just as far as the group setting, in the majority of people we see, we just don't see that many of them.
Yeah. I know what I was going to say about the ankle now. I like that because, like you said, she's in a group setting as well. She doesn't have you all the time. When you teach people how to do this anterior hip, posterior calf, and ankle stuff, she knows exactly what she needs to do as filler exercises when she's in the group. So it's almost like homework, and also you're teaching her how to kind of take care of herself.
Yeah.
And that she doesn't do anything that she shouldn't be doing. I got a good question too with that first workout that we did, the example one, the assessment workout that you do with people. Yes, I would still take them through a foam roll and a couple stretches, but I don't take them through the whole dynamic warm-up. I want to see how they move in the gym, and it's just based off of logistics and time. Most people, because you come in, they talk to you for a little bit, you try to get to know them, you're showing them where the cubbies are, where the bathrooms are. We only have a half hour to work out, and I would rather them get in some strength stuff and sweat and maybe get a little sore than I would to try to take them through all that beginning stuff like the foam roll, stretch, activate, dynamic warm-up. That can all come in the second and third workout. So that was a good question. I lost whoever asked for that. Okay, so we got our warm up. We got motor control. Okay, let's go to strength. Does she do any upper body explosive stuff?
Yeah, she can do everything up there. She had some limitations from the double mastectomy, but we just do some basic shoulder mobility stuff. She's fine. So she can throw med balls. She can do side toss. None of that's a problem.
Okay. Side toss. What about, what are we doing for lower body power? Anything?
I had her initially just on the shuttle because we were able to do like hops and jumps on there until we were able to get back to doing impact work.
Did you pair that like a core corrective with that, more ankle stuff?
So I had her doing some basic anti-extension stuff, so planking, bear hold, stuff like that, where she was able to continue to work on pelvic control. Question from Eugenia said, are all clients that are placed in groups going through that assessment? What we do with large group clients, not small semi-private personal training, but the type of setting this woman was in. If they're not coming to see someone like me because they have a pain issue, they're someone who's asymptomatic, they go through an entry-level adult program for, what is it? So they go through for 6 weeks. So essentially what they're doing is they go through an entry-level program while everyone else is going through whatever phase they're going through. And they cover things like hinging, squatting, planking, all the basic movements before we bring them into whatever phase everyone else is doing. And ideally those people are identified, and then we have a intern to be able to watch them, or a head coach to be able to watch them while the intern watches everybody else. So they go through what we call an entry-level adult program. Another question, hey, do you guys repeat SFMA after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, certain level of improvement? I look at their odds from Chris. Oh, hey, 2014 intern class. So Chris, I look at their DNs and their DPs, like their dysfunctional non-painful and their dysfunctional painfuls patterns every single time they come in. So if there's someone, this woman was seeing me 1 day a week in addition to coming to groups, every time she came in, I looked at her toe touch, I looked at her extension, and I looked at her squat, along with the breakouts, like going in closer and looking at the joint itself. So rather than that way, I could just see every single time, hey, let me see you touch toes. Let me see you do your extension. That way I can get it looked at really quickly. And there. David, why no pails and rails? No, so I did the pails and rails. I don't use the FRC terminology, so to speak. I just I have her do all her stretching is active stretching a la FRC. So her 90-90 hip stretch is I don't want to say contract relax, because I know they don't really like that terminology. But I had her actively do what you would term as pails and rails in her 90-90 stretch, in her hip rock, and especially in her ankle mobility. I do a box ankle mobility where she's actively contracting and then actively pulling herself in, as well as the controlled articular rotation. So I just try not to use the terminology because it gets confusing. If you haven't taken things like FRC, saying things like pails and rails just can throw some people off. But yeah, I mean, all stretching should be done active in any case. So it would be done what people would consider to be pails and rails.
Question for you. Would you consider her movement prep pretty much stays the same for both days, 2 days a week?
Yeah, it's pretty much always the same.
Got it. Okay, so movement prep is the same. So I'm just going to so this is day 1 over here, day 1, and this is day 2. And I'm just going to put a big ditto on the other side. Because she knows exactly, like you were saying, you've got it down to kind of a science where you're super specific and know exactly what she needs each workout. So day 1 for our upper body and lower body explosive and plank, we have chest pass, shuttle jump. If you don't know what a shuttle jump, basically it's a de-weighted jump on your back on a machine that kind of helps you take some of the pressure off your back and your joints. And so that jump, and remember, jump is 2 legs. On the second day, we're going to do a shuttle hop, which is on 1 leg. And then we have plank 1 day, and then we have bear holds the other day. So we've got 2 days of training there. Chest pass and side toss are going to be for 3 sets of 8. Shuttle jump's going to be for 3 sets of 8. Shuttle hop will be 3 sets of 5. Plank will be for 30 seconds. Bear hold will be for 30 seconds. How did I pick those numbers? So I'm currently writing a book right now, and one of the chapters that I have is about creating a program and how do you decide what sets and reps those are, we start everybody at 8 reps to keep it super simple. Why 8 reps? 8 reps is where you get hypertrophy, but it's also where you get learning, because you need enough reps over a period of time in order to learn something. So if you have 8 reps, if it's a big compound movement like a squat or a deadlift, I want to go heavier. So week 1 is 8, week 2 is 7, week 3 is 6, week 4 is 5. We don't go any lower than 5 reps, because then for us, you're just chasing numbers. It's not worth the risk or the reward unless you are a power lifter. For everyone else, you're just someone who wants to be healthy or be an athlete. If it's an accessory or a core exercise, you're going to go up from 8. So week 1 will be 8, week 2 will be 10, week 3 will be 12, week 4 will be 14. So core, corrective, and assistant exercises go up in reps. Big compound movements, your chin-ups, your squats, your deadlifts, your single leg deadlifts, your rear foot elevated split squats all go down in reps because we want to go heavier. So some exercises are better for heavier, some better exercises are for endurance, but a real simple rule is to just start everybody at 8 reps for pretty much everything. Okay, we've got hip dominant, knee dominant, bilateral. She does bilateral squat, right?
Yep, bilateral, just goblet squat, slightly elevated on a pad and with a heel lift to get around the ankle mobility issue, and slightly elevated on a pad so that she doesn't get so deep that she gets that FAI symptom. And she can squat to parallel bilaterally, but she cannot split squat down to a pad. And sometimes that'll happen because you'll see when people are split squatting, even if it's that hip is in front, they tend to get pinching a little bit sooner. Whereas on a bilateral squat, there's not as much stress on the hip. So that one's fine for her.
Can she kettlebell deadlift?
Yep, kettlebell deadlift's fine.
So day 1 is going to be goblet squat for our hip dominant, knee dominant bilateral exercise. We're filling that bucket right now. And then kettlebell deadlift the next day. All right, next we have, and then again, those are going to be for 3 sets of 8 to start. So remember, you can make things easier or harder in multitude of ways. You can add weight or add reps, so you're increasing the volume. You can add intensity, so the speed at which you lift it at. You can also add frequency and duration, so just do more of it. Then you can change the posture. You can change where the load is positioned on their body. So a goblet squat is going to be easier than a bar on your back or a weight over your head. And then the final one is the equipment that you use. So, for example, hugging a sandbag can actually make someone squat easier. You can squat with a dumbbell, you can squat with a barbell, you can squat with a weighted vest, you can squat with thousands of different things. So you can make things easier or harder in a multitude of ways. Next we have push, pull, horizontal. She can do all that stuff?
Yeah, no limitations in upper body whatsoever.
Okay, so push, pull, horizontal, let's say push up one day and TRX row the other day, 3 sets of 8. Anti-extension.
Real quick, I'm going to answer a question here from you, Bradshaw. If there was no shuttle available, would you omit lower body explosive? Possibly. If they were very symptomatic and you couldn't do things like skipping, lateral bound tends to be one of the lowest level power exercises you can do, because you can essentially make it into a single leg stance exercise where you just step side to side. That is something she can do. But we started with the shuttle, then I went to lateral bound. So if lateral bound is okay, that's very low level. Then I would start to do things like skipping. If you didn't have an option to do those, I would pull that out, because once they start to get stronger eccentrically and you improve any of the joint limitations like the ankle mobility limitation, then maybe you're able to start accessing that. So yep, if you didn't have a shuttle and you couldn't do some of those options, I would pull it out.
Yeah, and I would, like Kevin said, just get stronger. So we know that eccentric strength is what allows you to accept yourself when you jump. So if I was to throw a water balloon or an egg at you or Kevin, you would catch it by accepting the load. When you jump, so if I'm here and I jump and I land nice and soft, like in a depth jump, I'm learning how to catch myself. That's eccentric strength. So you have to be strong before you can be powerful. I've never met a powerful weak person. They don't exist. You can't have power without strength because you have to be able to accept the load of the ground. So just get them stronger, I guess, is my answer. I know, I'm not going to get them to them all. So we have now anti-extension. Can she do wheel rollouts, ball rollouts? Where'd you go with her?
We started with just basic planking because one of the main things as far as like improving the hip health and the low back pain was kind of secondary to that, was improving that control of her pelvis in the sagittal plane. So things like planking and bear hold and things like even a stick dead bug on her back was something like supported that I added in, because anything to start to just teach her what, you know, I don't like, again, using terminology specifically from certain thought processes, like, because it puts us in buckets, but zone of apposition or alignment between her pelvis and rib cage would be a better way to say it. Being able to work on that. So any of that anti-extension stuff was good, just lower level progressions rather than higher level.
Got it. So this is what I'm doing right now. She is going to do, well, because you already have front plank and bear hold up here with the explosive, I put in dead bug and lying hip flexion down here.
Okay, cool. Those are fine.
As anti-extension drills.
Yeah, those are things that we did. So that's right. Great.
They're very low level because you're on your back when you're doing them. So you can't really mess stuff up when you're on your back. The only way to get hurt on your back is if something falls on top of you. Okay, and then our extra open exercise is your extra ankle work.
Mm-hmm.
Question? How many sets and reps on the lying hip flexion, Kevin?
Typically either 2 to 3 sets. We maybe start with sets of 8, 10, 12, 14. That's something I build volume on, like Brendon said, with the assistant type stuff. Usually
holds or marches.
I'll have her do like a hold for a second and then back down. So she's doing multiple reps, typically attached to a Kaiser or a band off of a rack. And when you have people with like FAI issues, hip flexion centric pain issues, reestablishing their ability to flex their hip while, like Brendon said, maintaining, fighting that anti-extension, like being able to maintain that neutral position while they flex the hip is really important. So that's something that we would use. Rob Ferrari asks, based on her pain, would you start eccentric with her for lower body rather than performing regular reps? If for someone who can just enter into it, I'm fine with starting concentric. If she was dealing with like a tendonitis issue, something where there was like a patellar tendonitis, I would start isometric and eccentric because you want to reestablish that tissue quality. She didn't really have an issue as far as a tendonitis issue as much as she just had, we had to improve the joint movement quality in that hip and that ankle. But if she was dealing with a knee tendonitis or something like that, I might actually start eccentrically.
Cool. So I'm going to skip this third set because we're already, so if we're doing all this and that and we have conditioning, we probably only have an hour here. I'll save this third quad set for more of an athlete group. So again, remember, because I have it up here as a template, doesn't mean you have to fill in every box. Now, she has 2 days of conditioning. What are you going to have her do, since we don't want her running? What type of low impact stuff is she going to be doing, and what sets and reps and time?
Yep. So on day 1, we did assault bike. So she started by doing like interval work where she was essentially sprinting for, we were doing 10-20s, and so 10 on, 20 off at 120% of her max aerobic speed. So we found out what her max aerobic speed was. And she did 8 sets of that.
Yep. Then next day.
Yep. And so this is where I had to make an adjustment because like most of the group was doing the 10-20s on the bike, right? Whereas on day 2, the rest of the group would be doing tempos, right? So what I had her do was longer steady bike rides to just do some basic aerobic to kind of stimulate her running. Like I wanted her to kind of recreate her running experience. So we would do something like 3 to 5 miles on the assault bike, to try to at least get her have that same type of experience that she looked for out of running until she could get back to running.
And that's what, 12 to 20 minutes? On the
yeah, something like that. Yeah, she was about 15 minutes.
Okay. Great. Now, here's the thing too, is there are hundreds, if you've ever been on YouTube, has anyone here ever been on YouTube? There's about 100,000 other exercises that fit in each of these categories. So I saw somebody ask about, what about glute bridges? Love glute bridges. They're amazing. They would go under hip dominant bilateral. They could also be a warm-up exercise here. Again, we only have 2 days and we only have an hour each day. So we're not going to be able to get in everything that we want to get in, but maybe, right? So I think we need to talk about phases. So this is phase 1. And when I say phase 1, a phase will generally last 3 to 4 weeks. So that means phase 2, the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to progress a lot of these items. Now, some of the things she'll be able to progress on. So maybe she's going to be doing half kneeling side toss with one knee down, and then we can move her to standing side toss. Or she's kettlebell deadlifting 3x8, maybe we go to 3x10 or 3x12, or we go maybe to a trap bar or something, if that's something that we want to pursue later on, if she's earned the right to do that. So there's lots of ways to progress these things, but we progress them every 3 to 4 weeks because that's about how long it takes you to get good at something. Mm-hmm. So, and to said principle, adaptations to impose demands. So between 4 and 6 weeks is how long it'll take your body to adapt to the program that you're doing.
Couple questions I'm going to answer here. Raul asked, why did you ever kettlebell deadlift? She couldn't touch her toes. This was one of those toe touch situations that with the breathing, with cat camel, in the toe touch corrective, she was able to touch. So I taught her to hinge when we started deadlifting within like a week. It wasn't someone she didn't really have a limitation. So one of those hard limitations. It was difficult to get her to touch her toes. I got her to touch her toes in like a session. And then I wanted to keep deadlifting. She still had limitations in hip flexion issues. So like split squat was still on the no-go list for her. But I got her to be able to touch her toes, got her to hinge, and we started deadlifting. So we wanted to try to get that going. A note on the glute bridges from Suzanne is we did those in the warm-up. That was part of her motor control. And eventually we started adding that in as like a loaded exercise, like Brendon said, in phases. And then Chantel asked any reason why they should do explosive before strength and power. We always try to do exercises that have a higher neurological demand, like heavy implement power, plyos, med ball, sprinting, prior to getting to the weight room and doing heavy implement power things like clean. So we're going to have them do higher velocity movements first and move towards lower velocity, higher power, higher force movements second, because of the drain on the nervous system. If we were to have them do like heavy deadlifts and squats and then have them sprint, then we're going to get diminishing returns with the sprints, where the same is not necessarily true going the other way. So pretty good rule of thumb with us generally is that we do the higher velocity stuff first and then move towards the strength work.
A side note on the kettlebell deadlift, also remember you can kettlebell deadlift with a raised kettlebell. So you can raise the kettlebell on a yoga block. So say they can't touch their toes if they're like an inch or two away from the ground, you can raise that kettlebell up to them. So you can still kettlebell deadlift even if you don't have a toe touch. You just bring the bell closer to them so that they don't have to compensate in order to get it. Okay, everybody.
I think maybe I kind of run through. There's some more questions in this Q&A.
Yeah.
So it might be better, being as that we're only going to have till 7:30. It'd be good to kind of shut the book on this one and then see how far we get into the next one. So do you think that if I just answer some of these questions here?
Go for it. Yeah.
So that one we answered hip flexion work. Hi, from Vin in Brazil, shoulder mobility every day. Yeah, I mean, we weren't focusing on her as far as this case study, mainly because like she had great shoulder mobility. So we were pressing overhead, we were pulling, we were doing push-ups, we were doing rows. with the warm up, she did things like floor slides. She did things like T-spine every day, and that was fine. But there wasn't really a limitation for us to have to pursue there.
I think a lot of people forget that if you strength train correctly, you get stretching, right? If I do a full range of motion single leg deadlift, that is a great hamstring stretch. If I do a loaded rear foot elevated split squat with 100 pounds in each hand, that is a loaded quad stretch. If I do a dead hang on my chin ups and go sternum to bar, that is a full lat stretch. So if you keep it, you won't lose it. But if you don't use it, you lose it. So the full strength training, so like you're saying, she had great shoulder mobility. We didn't need to spend any time on that. If we just strength train her properly using all of our patterns, she'll never lose her shoulder mobility. Mm-hmm. And you're much better served spending like your time, like you said, filling the ankle and the hip bucket, because those are her problems.
Yep. Jen Rudy had asked, do you tend to teach RKC plank or traditional front plank for beginner clients? I'd say how we plank all the time is what you would call like an RKC plank. Again, I try to just call it a plank, but yeah, I mean, we teach them to actively create tension throughout the movement the entire time, as opposed to them like hanging out there all the time. So breath and anterior tension. Brad Gallagher, with her having past history of running regularly and lack of mobility in the ankle, did she ever suffer pain or problems with her Achilles? If not, did you work on strengthening Achilles to be on the safe side? She didn't actually come in with any Achilles pain. Most of her pain was pretty central to where she had the repair on her ankle, which was the lateral aspect. But she had tension pretty much in that entire lower quarter as far as the tissue stiffness is concerned. So yeah, and she did get Achilles strengthening in that. Once we started being able to impact, we did a lot of skipping and pogoing and things like that, so she could, one, just do the active warm-up, but two, so she could start to have some elastic stretch. So when Brendon talks about phases, right, like initial phase, we didn't do any plyos or impact at all because it just didn't feel good to her. But once we got some regular joint mobility in there, we started skipping. We started doing pogos. We started doing plyos and stuff like that. And that is how she started to get some adaptation in the lower leg there. So probably phase 2 into phase 3. And now her regular training program revolves around her doing that stuff and warming up before she runs, doing that stuff and things like that.
We had a great question from somebody that was, where is it? Milan asked, said principle, how can you adapt to something if you're only doing it 2 times per week? Love it. Yeah, when you barely do anything, which is 90% of our clients, you adapt, because when you do nothing and you go to doing something, when your soreness starts to go away, which is about week 4, 5, or 6, you are adapting to what we're asking you to do. Now, does the said principle work for elite athletes who are training? If you're an elite athlete and you have great genetics and you're fit and you train twice a week, you don't have anything to adapt to. So when I say said principle for somebody who trains twice a week, this case study example for somebody who only runs and lifts no weights, lifting weights, she's going to adapt to that in 4 to 6 weeks. I am not saying that she is an elite athlete who needs 4 to 5 or 6 days a week of training in order to adapt to it. So remember, you've got to put said principle context to the person that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really important. When you work with general population, especially like this woman never lifted weights before. So she can get better doing things 2 days a week for a long time because it's so much, her training age is so low. Like Brendon talks about being a bucket filler. Her bucket's empty in strength. Her bucket was empty in mobility too. She never like actively moved her joints, like done active joint circles and active stretching like this before. She just ran. So her bucket was so empty, we have a lot of time to fill it. And then when you think about with general pop also, like what they want and economically what they can pay for, it's not necessarily what we would expect out of ourselves. Like a lot of you people listening, if you're strength coaches, like you like lifting weights, like you want to train 4 or 5 days a week because you like it, right? A lot of this woman's a teacher. She even says to me, like, I don't like lifting weights. Like she's like, oh, I guess I'll come and train because she knows it's good for her and she likes the people that work at the gym. But like it would not be their ideal thing. So you have like at some point you're just maintaining those qualities for those people so that they can keep she doesn't necessarily want to run 10 miles ever. She just wants to run 3 miles 3 times a week and not have pain. And like, that's her ceiling for her, because that's not really what they want. So you always have to kind of adjust your expectation and get them, like, she just wants to be pain free doing those activities. Is there a time limiting? Is there a limiting factor 1 hour? Or are you better off getting a better variety of exercises than sets 2 to 3 or less exercises? Well, I think initially I try to think of almost along the lines of that intro level workout, like Brendon said. Like, those were that was pretty meat and potatoes. We squatted, we deadlifted, we did anti-extension, we pushed and we pulled, right? And that was kind of a basic outline. And maybe eventually we did single leg deadlift. And so we can start to get more in as we go. They kind of earn their way into a more advanced program. And we go from there.
Margaret asked, would you do these 2 workouts for all phase 1? Yes. We would do all these workouts for phase 1 for 4 weeks. So she would get this workout, each workout 4 times over a 4-week period. Or you could move this out to 6 weeks and she'd get 6 of each workout so that she got really good at it. Mm-hmm. And then progress to the phase 2.
And to make a note too, like, so that's essentially pretty close to what she was doing in the group 2 days a week. But she would see me 1 day a week, one-on-one in the clinic. And then I'd take her out to the gym. So she'd see me in the clinic for part of the time, and then we go out to the gym part of the time. And then that's when we would start feeding in those new exercises. In my context, that's when I would feed in new exercise in the clinic. Oh, hey, we got to single leg deadlift today, looked pretty good. Maybe we work this into one of the days of the week. And again, I could go talk to one of her coaches and say, hey, why don't we work in single leg deadlift? Or why don't we work in an assisted split squat? That's what we started to do once our split squat felt better. A split squat with a pad and a TRX. And then we worked in that, right? So we'd feed in those things as she started to look better with me in a one-on-one setting.
Do we use paper? How do you track programs? Personally, I'm a paper and pen guy. We still have paper folders. With athletes, we make the athletes write in all of their exercises and stuff on sheets, and we keep the sheets. With our adults don't care. We've tried to make them do sheets. Most of them can't see the sheets. They don't want to do it. They have 1 hour. They bitch about having to do the sheets. All they care about is getting their workout in. And then what I do personally as the coach is I pick 2 or 3 exercises a workout, and I say, hey, I want everyone to tell me what they kettlebell deadlift today and how many push-ups they got, and I want to see your last set. And then I record that. And then next week, I either do it again, or in 4 weeks, I say, hey, today we're going to do kettlebell deadlift again. And then the next workout, I say, hey, today I want to know what you goblet squat and what your 1 mile bike ride time was. So I pick the focus, and then I keep the weights. Most of your clients honestly don't give a shit. So you have to make them care, but they're not going to record it themselves. Yes, you have those clients that bring in their workout journal and they write it in every single workout and everything they ate that day. But most of your people aren't going to want to do that. So again, we're always thinking 80-20, and 80-20 is where you make most of your money, helping those people, especially as a trainer, if they're going to be paying you that type of money. Was she able to do a sort of low box step up, Kevin, heel touch rather than a split squat?
So I didn't ever had her try to do low box step ups or heel touch or anything. What we essentially did is I just said, let's get the hip normal in as far as like her range of motion goes. Like, can I bring her passively in the flexion without pain? Once we could start to do that, then I started having her do assisted split squat, and we were fine. So I never really had to try to dig that deep for an alternative unilateral drill, because we just trained bilateral for a few weeks and she could still single leg deadlift. And then once the hip range of motion was normal, then I started to feed in the unilateral stuff, because for me, I wanted to make sure the mobility of that hip was normal before I had her start to try to do anything unilateral on that side. So I never actually tried it.